everyone. Today we have our another new episode and we will discuss on generative AI. We have our world famous speaker, Professor Moses Ma and Professor David Smith. Professor Moses Ma, he is an innovator for Brainstorm Bot. Already he get patent and we want to congratulate you for your brilliant effort on this Brainstorm Bot. And also Professor David Smith, he has his business incubations. Maybe we can do exclusive projects from today's sessions. So Professor Mojesma, I know you have your presentation. What you want to discuss with our audience? You know, our audience basically different politicians, political institutions, different corporation and academia. So let's start.
Sure. So I guess David and I should do introductions before we start with the presentation. So my quick introduction is, uh, yes, I am a innovation coach and consultant, and we've trained many large institutions and banks. And what we did is we distilled this knowledge into a series of AI products. The first is Brainstorm Bot, but we're doing a couple of others that I'll talk about as well. And I'll do that in the presentation. So I'm looking forward to meeting David and then discussing the technology. So David, I'll hand it over to you.
Well, thank you so much. A lot of the folks on this know me because I participate so often, but my background is a technologist, professional futurist, serial entrepreneur. I've done work from designing the innovation organization called InQtel at the Central Intelligence Agency to starting companies to implementing trillion-dollar projects that affect everybody's life. So anyways, and it's great to see David on here as well too.
Thank you, Professor David J. Kelly. We will discuss on generative AI, and you are also scientists and innovators. We want to know more about your AGI lab, and after that, we go for the presentation. Professor David J. Kelly.
Well, I think in terms of my work, a lot of it's around cognitive architectures, which, if you're familiar with generative AI, it's a lot of our work has been related to, we've been using generative AI for 7 years. I think we have had a partnership with OpenAI for 5 years, but it's related to research. But our particular thing has been around cognitive architectures, which you might think of as it relates to generative AI as a way of managing the context of the system. You know, like we can design a system that uses generative AI that, you know, when you ask it to write a scientific paper, it'll go out and do the research and get the references and write a 50-page dissertation and make its own decisions. Which parts of it will use generative AI, but it's managing the integrity of what it's doing and the decision-making processes that make it choose one thing over the other. That is kind of the focus of of our research. I guess that's probably the easiest way to understand it.
Thank you, Professor Mojesma. What you want to discuss? But I want to share a very good news. World Talent Economy Forum, we developed a research institution completely based on artificial intelligence, and we are getting a very complex situation from industry. Example, BIRI, Bangladesh Rice Research Institution. They have a lot of research in rice productions and everything, and we have a lot of population. They are looking for solutions from AI. And many interesting things happening in South Asia. And all of the three speakers, Professor Mojesma, Professor David Smith, and Professor David Kelly, we want to invite you in our board, especially our AI research centers. I believe that a lot of interesting things we can solve together. Professor Mojesma.
Okay, so let me do a presentation. All right. This will only take 10 or 15 minutes. So share screen. Please let me know if you see this slide. Yeah, so are the slides viewable?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll begin. Uh, okay, are they still viewable? Okay, so I'm going to talk about the use of generative AI in innovation. But in the second part of the talk, in the first part, I want to talk about this project that we're working on. Quite interesting. The World Economic Forum predicts that 85 million jobs will be displaced by 2025, and the disruption that it will have on society is estimated to be twice or three times as bad as COVID. The thing about COVID is that it was a shock to the system. There were many jobs lost, but as of last month, uh, almost all those jobs have been regained because it was a temporary shock to the system. The problem with AI job losses is that these losses are relatively permanent because they're created by new jobs that require a new skill set. The issue that this is a problem is something we it's a feeling that it's related to something that bees have. In the U.S., a significant number of bees have died out, which is very bad because bees are probably the most important insect for humanity in terms of agriculture, because over 30% of all crops are actually um, uh, use bees to grow. Um, in this system of beehives, there's something called a colony collapse disorder. So they were trying to find out why are they disappearing, and it turns out if a 30% of the worker bees suddenly disappear, for example, they're susceptible to DDT or some other kind of pesticide, uh, they'll die out. But the queen needs the nectar provided the workers to nurse new bees, and because that system is impacted, the entire colony collapses and all the bees die, which is very, very scary. And the elimination of the estimated 100 to 300 million jobs over the next 5 years could trigger something as as significant as the colony collapse disorder when you create a exogenic shock that's that great. So what we think is that humanity needs to think carefully about how to deploy AI and use something we call human centered, which is to focus on technologies that augment human ability rather than just replace them. And this means that you have to do um, serious AI training for society before you start doing layoffs, so that any company thinking, oh, we may lay off, you know, 20% of our people later this year. So they're thinking that's actually doable if the market's shrinking. But it may actually create a shock if everyone does that at the same time. If it's like to one certain industry, you could usually absorb those kinds of job losses and make it through. But what we think is that a good rule of thumb is that every organization should consider AI skills training 3 to 6 months for the entire enterprise offered before they do any layoffs. And actually, that is very useful to the organization because if you lay off a bunch of people and then go and hire them, and AI skills are scarce, the cost of that will actually be significantly more than if you can actually train internally and just keep the ones and not have to lay off as many people. So the biggest problem is that the cognitive challenge of AI skills acquisition is comparable to something like learning a new language. So if those of you watching are interested in generative AI and they decided, oh, I'm going to use something like Midjourney. Midjourney is a very good example of a very good tool that makes images like this, but it actually requires uh, a couple of months to learn how to master. So we think that there are three levels for AI skills acquisition. One is AI literacy, so you can talk about it and you don't feel afraid and you can go and learn something. You're like an immigrant to a new country, and at least you're literate and you can get around. Then there's actually AI proficiency, which means you're actually good enough at a tool that you can actually produce what you wanted to produce instead of just it producing stuff and you be in a state of mystery about how you did that. Then finally, there's AI mastery, which is the highest level. And that means that you can actually produce things that are much better than they thought, the developers thought were possible because you've merged human intelligence with AI capabilities. And I think that in general, literacy may take a few weeks. You could do a quick workshop. Proficiency takes a few months just to learn a language, or like learning the piano, you wouldn't expect to learn it in a week. And finally, mastery takes a few years. Okay, so we've created a project called AI Mastermind, and it's a project to um, develop a low cost, massively scalable, disruptively effective AI skills training system. And what we wanted to do is figure out how to do it at 1/10 the cost that normal training would take. And we think we have that solution by using AI to train AI and using something called peer coaching. And our goal is actually to open source this after we fine tuned it, and then distribute it to 100 million people. Now that's actually a huge number, but in my past I've actually built hit software that have reached millions of people. So I'm not afraid of that number, and I think one of our David said that you build products that have reached trillion-dollar markets. So it's definitely doable. So we think that this level of effort actually is a public-private requirement. So it should be thought of as a Manhattan Project for human potential. This kind of change to create a critical mass, not for uranium to explode, but for humans to create a critical mass of skills and knowledge, could actually propel your company or your country beyond others. The main reason AI adoption is difficult is because people are afraid, oh, if we let AI in the door, it'll eventually, cause the job layoffs. Those layoffs are coming. This is like a digital ice age. You won't be able to stop it. The only issue, um, there's a joke in the U.S. If a bear is chasing you, you don't need to run faster than the bear. You just need to run faster than the person next to you, and that's probably what's going to happen. Okay, so moving forward, if you're interested, check out the website at aimastermind.team. We'd love to talk to you. We're looking at how do we partner up and make this effective. And again, we are going to open source this at some point. And then I'll just show a couple of other slides that will answer questions that you have, like how does this actually work, right? Um, so we have this model called ikigai. Ikigai is a Japanese term for finding something you love to work to do as work, and then you'll be happy. So in AI, it's how do you use AI to increase greater happiness. So the focus that we have is that in this training, we've actually looked at other skills training courses. We found out that if enterprises kind of build their own, they tend to
Chris.
do stuff that's too focused on work, and people see it as work and they don't engage, and the trainings usually fail. So what we do is we actually start with something that's incredibly fun. So the first lesson is like, how do you write a song with AI, or how do you create a video? And then what we do is pivot to practicality. When we pivot, you could actually pivot to many things. So we'll do one lecture on prompt engineering, which is vital. And then we also talk about academic adherence, like how do you create study circles that increase the success rate. But the most important thing we do is that we actually focus on innovation as a skill or as a creative skill. And we use our brains from
It's
Black
a very
5.
small conference and a very expensive conference.
Excuse me? Oh, something bled through. Anyway, I'll finish up really quickly. So I think that there's something we can call human-centric AI that has to do with harmonizing job losses against increasing revenues and innovation skills. I think up training is very important to do that before you deploy. And then and the second bot we're releasing when you sign up for the brainstorm bot is something called Design Sprint Bot. We think design sprints can use generative AI uh, to drive them. A design sprint is what Silicon Valley now uses as a secret weapon to design better products. So this is why Google Ventures does one for every new venture they launch, a design sprint, and it's a secret for companies like Nest and Apple uh, around design thinking. So we basically merged generative AI with design thinking and agile design sprints in order to improve the system. So we'd love to talk to you about that as well. Anyway, I will just wrap up and let other people start talking. We can discuss all of these things, like why uh, job losses are going to absolutely happen, and then how you can deal with it. So that's basically my presentation. Does that
Thank you for your presentation, Professor David Smith. What you want to discuss about generative AI, and if you have any comments on today's presentation.
Well, Sharif, thank you so much. And Dr. Mo, it's a great presentation. I love your concept and would love to talk to you more about it, wearing particularly my professional futurist hat. And the human-centric AI is very important. I was an executive at the MCC Consortia and others where that was a real important concept of what we did as we regained the computer industry. But generative AI is really one of the hot topics today as you look across all the AI uh, marketplace. And generative AI is really a technology that can create new content, really, such as text, images, code, given a basic prompt and some criteria. When a user enters a request or instruction, it analyzes the patterns in existing data and it generates new outputs that resemble human created content. And sometimes uh, it's very complex. Some you can tell, some it's very good. So how does it work? AI, generative AI uses a computer process called deep learning and machine learning. It involves analyzing very large data sets called LLMs and others to identify common patterns and structure. Then usually these models incorporate neural networks, which is really inspired by how our human brain processes the information over time. And then they become more human-like and begin to learn and grow. And the models have made this type of natural language processing tool available to consumers and others. And you see applications in all different types of areas like text creation, image synthesis, code creation, music, benef- uh, and look at ways to do things. I have used, we, like the other David, we've been using OpenAI for many, many years since version one, and I've actually had it write poetry for me. And I am not a poet, let me tell you, but it was really good. But the applications are so many different areas, like in content, it is text, it's storytelling, design, and art. There. I love seeing generative AI being used in music and audio, and I have used generative AI to compose harmonies, melodies, and create custom voiceovers and do voice synthesis. One of the companies in my portfolio companies in our holding company uses a 3D avatar using generative AI and to provide real text answers to users in social emotional learning. Generative AI can be used for data augmentation and particularly data generation. It's used a lot as consumer facing for personalization and recommendation systems and chatbots and virtual assistants. Some of the more interesting applications are in some of the scientific research, and generative AI models have been used in drugs and drug discovery within physics. And in both of those areas, generative AI has helped generate new knowledge that wasn't there before. And the generative AI market is getting larger and larger. By 2030, market experts believe that it's going to be a $1.3 trillion market, and it's currently growing there. Today, well, in 2022, the AI market was around, generative AI market was around 10.5 billion. And last year it was around 30 billion. So you can see the growth there, and that translates to around a 40% compound annual growth rate going forward, and you see that going further. A couple of quick other comments to get into it. Some of the trends really are there's widespread adoption and it's showing up everywhere. And seeing it going there. The investment in generative AI is exploding. Uh, uh, it is the highest topic at many of the conferences, for example. You see educational applications for generative AI that universities and others are still trying to learn how to work with it. It gives you opportunities for personalized learning, content creation. But on the other hand, there's ethical consideration, biases, and privacy concern. One of the biggest uh, concerns I have is the biases today. For example, the Asia region is very poorly representative in the LLM systems that are used to train and drive generative AI. And so it's more of a North American centric. Even though if I look at the global leaders, the United States is first in number of companies and dollars going into generative AI. But surprisingly, China is number 2 in the world in the research and investments and applications coming out on generative AI. So, Dr. Sharif, I can get more into those, but I think that gives you a good set of introductions for you. And later on, we can come back and talk about the impacts in the developing world and others. But let me stop here.
Thank you. Professor David Jekari. Oh, yes.
Can I just add one thing to what Dr. Smith was saying? I think that the most interesting applications of AI and generative AI are in areas that we aren't expecting. For example, a researcher, can't remember which university, I think University of Chicago, has invented a new antibiotic against MRSA using AI technologies, which was not predicted by any of the scientists. So things are going to happen that are kind of surprising. So this area has much more application than we can actually see right now. But anyway, I'll hand it over to Dr. Kelly.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor David J. Kelly.
So I think one thing I'd like to just say is I think the impact AI technology is having is a lot more profound than people realize. There's a concept in futurism called the singularity, and it's kind of our opinion that something called a slow singularity is in the middle of happening. And the profoundness of what that means is I think greater than people realize. And I know that the singularity being defined is the point when human intelligence or artificial intelligence surpasses human intelligence. But I think the issue with that is that that's already happened, especially when you start talking about groups of humans and organizations with the aid of AI, meta-organisms, as it were, that far surpass the intelligence of any one human or system. And that kind of stuff is already in the marketplace and affecting things. And I don't think it's really been fully identified that this is in progress right now. Now it is, in my opinion, it's a slow uptake, which gives us, an easier path to adoption, an easier path in terms of the society and social implications to So we have a chance to react to this stuff, the kinds of innovation, the economic changes, both good and bad, kind of even globalization at a level that just is probably hard for us to understand in general. And then the cultural and psychological impacts of those changes is just going to be much more profound than people realize. Now, there is some risk to these kinds of technologies, but that said, I think the slow uptake of this kind of uh, slow singularity um, uh, is the risk is manageable, and I don't think it's anything to necessarily be scared of, but it's stuff we have to work through as a society. And I think that's kind of the most profound change, that we don't even know what that will look like in 5 or 10 years.
Excellent. Professor Modesma, yes.
Yes, I wanted to add to that. The definition of a mechanical singularity is simply the point in which the spinning top's motion can no longer be predicted. And I think that's actually already happening with things like the production of new antibiotics and other things. However, I did want to mention that there are limits to generative AI if you dig into it. If you actually start using it as a writer, you'll quickly learn that it can't write a hit book, right? Or it can't write a hit screenplay. And the reason is our use of it in the Brainstorm Bot product to help people stimulate creative thinking is that generative AI uses something I call stochastic plagiarism. It basically goes and collects stuff from all over the internet, merges them together, looks for a pattern, and it's sort of like your iPhone does predictive text. It predicts what the next word or next sentence should be, and produces stuff that is based stuff on stuff that's out there already, which means that any idea that AI produces, unless you're very careful and you modify it, will actually never survive a prior art search, because you just do a search for that string of text and you'll find someone else already produced the idea, usually a couple of years ago. So it's important that companies realize that when they're using these tools, that you actually have to merge human skill with the output of generative AI to create something that's truly innovative and actually market worthy. How do you guys feel about that?
So I think just a comment on that. When I talk about the singularity, it's not just OpenAI. OpenAI is one element of it. But, like when we start talking about existing systems that I've seen that don't use generative AI, but make decisions based on their subjective feelings and drive goal and interests and things like that in software systems, and you combine that with systems that like vector databases and things like that find kind of build out ideas as knowledge graphs, and then use OpenAI or some generative AI to kind of stitch the elements between the ideas together, so you end up with something coherent that a human understands. That's when you start talking about these smarter than human systems. And the thing is, humans already in groups, as soon as you start the ability to filter out bias, you start getting superhuman performance in terms of intellect. Humans are part of the equation when we start talking about this singularity. And OpenAI, like I said, is just a single tool in a plethora of tools that, when they come together, that's what's creating this societal change.
Dr. Sharif, let me just share a couple of things that Dr. Kelly's comments sparked. Let me see. I'm very visual, so I actually prefer to share things visually. There it is. Okay, I hope you can see this. I had mentioned this earlier. We just got a patent published. It isn't all the way there yet, but it's a fundamental patent for the use of blockchains to manage intellectual property. And what Dr. Kelly was talking about is merging this AI with knowledge graphs. That's exactly what we're doing. We're basically creating a Merkle tree or a cyclic versus acyclic directed graph for the knowledge. And then this allows innovation itself to work kind of more effectively. And then just another thing I'll show you very briefly. Um, Here is a paper that I wrote a few years ago. I would co-authored this. It's in Science, and it's called Blockchain Facilitated Sharing to Advance Outbreak R&D. So one of the areas that we're very interested in is how do you stop the next pandemic? And part of the solution is using blockchains. Um, and that was really fun to actually publish in Science. It's sort of like considered a bucket list item for scientists. But I believe it's that when you merge things like blockchain with AI, with quantum computing, that actually produces the result that is, a singularity. You can't predict where it will go, but it's the merging of these underlying technologies together that produces things that we can't anticipate so well, and can live to result in better than exponential uh, rates of adoption and increasing returns.
Yeah,
Anyway, I just wanted.
I think those are perfect examples of the kinds of systems I'm talking about. It's these kinds of systems when they come together, that's what's creating the singularity. It's not open AI per se. It's these tools like what you just showed.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of, if you look at what we're suggesting, we can suggest it's possible to prevent the next pandemic. We think it's possible to train 100 million people in 2 years. These are like very big things, right? And they're actually possible now for humanity if we allow ourselves to be a little less scared. One of the problems I think around AI is that in any one company, you'll find people thinking, oh, can we just slow down? We just got over the pandemic, and it's like so too much to think about to lay off people and adopt AI. If we can just slow things down, it'll be better. Like I said, that analogy of running faster than the person next to you when a bear is chasing you. A bear is chasing us. Uh, Change is happening at an ever increasing speed, and you actually need to speed up. So those companies that are considering AI and saying we should delay, they should realize that the next person that their competitors could actually adopt it faster and be more successful, and actually create a shift in the market very, very quickly. Um, there's a saying, I don't know, do you guys ride bicycles? I love riding a road bike. So there's a thing called a Peloton. And a Peloton is when all the bikers get together like in the Tour de France, and they use the air pressure to kind of stick together. So anybody leading a Peloton is getting like maybe a 5% air drag, and the people behind are kind of dragging and using that as energy. The only time you can break away from the Peloton is up a hill, because when you're going up a hill, the slower ones slow down and it breaks the air pressure, and then that's when you can do your breakaway move. The hill that we're facing is the adoption of these multiple technologies, and it gives an opportunity for market leaders to break away, but only if you have the skill and energy to do that. If you're willing to break away from the crowd and actually take a market leadership position. And this is actually true for countries. I believe that the country that has the highest adoption of AI skills acquisition will be more successful than other countries. And then there, and WIPO has a list of um, what are the most innovative countries. I think it's possible for a country to jump 20 spots during this next 3 to 5 years if they adopt AI and blockchains and quantum computing faster than their neighbors. Even though they're poor, it- there's a chance you can do that. And I think many countries have actually demonstrated that. In fact, the country you're in, Dr. Sharif, Bangladesh has actually jumped up because they were using large mega projects in through the government to stimulate development. So I think it's possible for countries to um, leapfrog others using this opportunity now of breaking away when there's a hardship coming.
Thank
So I
you.
think
Yes.
I wrote an article a couple of years ago for the Henderson Institute at the Boston Consulting Group, and I think the scenario in that article that I used was that, and this illustrates the kind of possible economic changes. Um, was that when you start having, say, a corporation, right, that starts being cognitively self-aware and functioning collectively, that it's the individual parts of that meta-organism are greater together than they are individually. And when this system starts caring about itself, you start having a meta-organism that ends up taking better care of itself. And you could conceivably have a corporation that is optimizing for profit and also optimizing for environment so it can be healthy in the long run, and optimizing for the benefit of its employees to the point of taking better care with higher salaries and less work, and lower stress loads, and a flatter organization where people are functioning collectively to make decisions. And like the proposal in that article was around these collective intelligence systems that would actually function as the making the top level executive decisions in place of people, where everyone contributes, and how we can abstract things like political tension and some of the other problems you have with people that are kind of inherent, to help filter out many of the biases. I mean, there's like 188 identified evolutionary biases in the human mind, that if we can just filtering that out of the decision making processes, generate super intelligence. But when you have these a super intelligent meta organism making decisions, and you could respond to the market faster, you can take better care of the employees, you actually care because the employees are what makes the meta organism powerful in the marketplace. And I think there's a lot of impact that these kinds of companies will be able to do in the long run. And if you look at some of the work, like the Henderson Institute in particular talks about bionic companies and things like that, and BCG in general is going into these Fortune 500 companies and helping them do this sort of thing. And I think it's kind of a great example of the kinds of stuff that we'll see more and more of, that'll not only benefit the employees of these meta organisms, as it were, but society in general, from just the general standard of living to education to economic prowess. But there's going to be a lot of upturn as things change, and you have job losses and new jobs, and there's a learning curve. And I like some of the ideas that you guys have been talking about training people on AI, and I think there's a lot to be said for those kinds of activities that move us forward together. And the more we as a species can move forward together, the better everyone's going to be. But in any case.
Yes.
So let me add, I completely agree with you. I think that we're facing an opportunity where we can define what leadership means in the 21st century. So again, if you look at the idea of an ice age, when the leader of the tribe says, we need to do something, and then leads the tribe to warmer weather, and then learns how to use fire to defend against the cold together, and it allows the tribe to depend on each other. That's actually, I think, the main thing that a tribe does is they have, you can assume that they have your back, and then you could use that to your mutual benefit. I think organizations in the future will be defined by leaders who are actually able to move rather than just say, I don't know what we're doing, let's not do anything, and just freeze to death.
Thank you, Professor David Smith. Mr. David Smith, are you with me?
He probably stepped away for a minute.
Okay.
Actually, I'm back, Sharif.
Oh,
Let me just spend 1 minute talking about um, the international side, where we're doing there. But Sharif, let me answer one thing quick through my son, and I'll be back. Okay.
okay, so I'll mention something.
Yes.
So we just got a agreement from a medium-sized bank to do our AI skills training, and I'll explain why it makes sense, right? So the first time they do it, they send 10 employees that are primarily in HR and will become trainers, and they go through the system. We're actually collecting information about what works for them and embedding that using machine learning to learn how people teach each other, how they can support each other to meet their goals and to learn more effectively. And then they can actually, because we open source it, they can take our content back to the organization and then are free to teach the others. So if those 10 people go and teach 10 other people, then that would be 100 people. But usually they'll do it 3 or 4 times. So it could be 3 or 400 people. So so using this model, we think it's possible for this bank to teach 5,000 employees for under $20 per person, which is probably 1/10 of what anybody would charge to do a significant skills training. But this relies on forming a tribe where the people inside the company care about other employees and want to lift everyone else into that new skills category. So those are the kinds of things that we have to do. One is use machine learning to learn how people learn, which is a very interesting problem. If you think about it, all of us, if we look back at the critical times when we decided that we could be successful or we could learn something, it usually wasn't some content that changed you. It was that you met a great teacher that lifted your idea of who you could be. And that's what we're trying to capture in this AI is something with such EQ that it behaves and helps other peer coaches become the best coaches they can. So for me, since we're killing time for David Smith to get back, it was a history teacher. I was just like an average student, and then he took me in his office and he said, "I think you're actually smart." And I said, "Why do you think that?" He says, "Yeah, just trust me on this." So I took his class, AP Advanced Placement History, and then I just aced it, and it was the first time somebody believed in me, because you know apparently what had happened is I had a very bad cold that they did an IQ test when I was young, and it came out a little bit above average. And when they retested me, it was like very high, right? I ended up going to Caltech and then getting a 4.0 there. So they obviously got it wrong. But in American education, they kind of base everything on an IQ score. If it's not like a genius level, they actually put you into vocational education. And if it is genius level, they probably overcompensate and don't teach any vocational skills. Um, so I think it's valuable to find great teachers. And I will mention the best teacher I ever had was a professor at Caltech named Richard Feynman. He's a great physicist and a Nobel laureate. And when he walked in the room, he had like this long hair. It's almost like he had a fan machine. He walked in. He had wore a scarf. It looked like a TV show or a movie where
Yeah,
Feynman would
I
show
think
up.
I've met him.
You met him, yeah. He
Yeah,
was amazing, right? And when he came in, he never actually did any math. He basically taught you how he think, and he would tell stories. And at the end of each class, you basically just wanted to be a physicist more than anything else because you could see how beautiful nature was. So what he did is he taught that nature is beautiful and to love it, and that's what drove him to understand, trying to figure it out. And and he moved and shifted many people because of that. Those are the kinds of things we want to encapsulate in an AI. So how do you turn Richard Feynman into an AI?
Well, I think more fundamentally than turning Richard Feynman into an AI uh, is the fact that if the more we actually care and take care of others and help, lift everyone else around us up, the better it is for everyone. That if everyone is more well off, everyone will be even more well off, and it's just kind of a vicious circle of goodness. And I think that's how, as a species, we become more mature and hopefully better overcome some of the drama that we see in the news. And it's by doing the things like what you're doing sounds absolutely wonderful, helping people become more educated, learn how to do it. I know that some of the people that we've seen in the marketplace, I know of one person in particular that I will not identify, that using AI tools is able to hold down 3 full-time jobs because the AI does most of their work. And it's this kind of functionality that the more everyone knows how to do it, the more we can hang out and have fun, and it's just less work for everyone and better economically. But I think there's going to be some hard economic lessons that whether it's groups or countries or different people will experience as society goes through this. So the more we can kind of spread that metaphorical love, the better for everyone.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's actually an opportunity for both, and there's going to be a lot of pain on the way to getting there.
Thank you. Professor David Smith, anything you want to add for? I know you are busy. Yes.
Sure, I'd like to add a couple of things. I said earlier that I would come back and talk about developing countries. Some of the key things for developing countries is availability, accessibility, and the quality of the data. You cannot do generative AI without good quality data. Next one is to build the expertise. How do you develop the skills? How do you prioritize capacity, building local talent? And how do you do the international collaborations? What's the data ownership, privacy? What's the security? What's the governance, accountability, and transparency? And going back to what I talked about earlier, we need to, particularly for developing nations, understand the biases, the discrimination, and the inequalities that are built in the model. The other thing is generative AI has a huge environmental impact. The high computational requirements contribute to carbon emissions. There's financial constraints, there's ethical, infrastructure. Infrastructure is very important, and developing nations have to add more. But the key thing for developing nations is they can add local context. They can add the local cultural adaptation. And that's why I said earlier that the current LLMs are not really optimized for Asia. That needs to happen there. And then there's this whole trend now of new regulation around generative AI in EU, in China, in many different places, United States. And the data privacy really is going to be a huge impact coming further. And so, we're moving in a time where widespread adaptation's already there. And the industry impacts are really going. And there's going to be steady AI adoption, generative AI adoption going forward. We just have to look at how it impacts the human level performance and how it works with across the things that have already been talked about earlier on your panel, Sharif. So that's, to me, some of the important things you have going forward. And particularly as you are focused so much on the developing world, these are some real important considerations.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Professor Mosesma, anything you
Yes,
want to add?
I think since we're running low on time, I'd like to invite all of you to, if you're in the Southeast Asia or in a developing nation, please contact Dr. Sharif. We're partnered with him. And if you're interested, we'd love to share these training techniques with you. Like I said, our plan is to open source and to impact 100 million people, which is not going to be possible unless everybody digs in and works together. I'd also like to invite Dr. Kelly and Smith to contact me. I'd love to get to know you better and to get your input on how we can refine the system to be more effective. Because we're not going to get a lot of chances to do it right, and it's going to require all of us getting together and getting past our differences to it to implement something of this scale.
Thank you. Professor David J. Kelly, what's your closing remarks for today?
Well, I just want to say that I'm impressed with some of the stuff you guys are working on in terms of education. I do think it's really important. I think, you got to be careful with some of this AI stuff. I 3 years ago, I posted, so there's this organization called MIRI, the Machine Intelligence Research Institute, and one of their founders accused our idea of open sourcing all the research for AGI related systems like OpenAI as a mutual suicide pact for humanity. I was quite pleased about being death threatened by such a famous person, but keep in mind that there are people out there that are going to try to fight the adoption of this kind of technology. And while I think everyone needs to be free to make those choices, there's that pushback, from even within our own communities. I about fell over dead when the person in question accused. It's like, what? We're trying to open what? That was just hard for me to compute. But it's important to try to be understanding with people, and the more we help people, the more educated they are, and the more they can use these tools themselves, the better off all of us are. But there will be some trials, as it were, as we mature as a species. But I'm looking forward to working with everyone, and that's
David, you're so right. I predict that some demagogue is going to use the term slogan, "Robots will not replace us," right? And he'll make political hay out of that and use that to get elected somewhere. There's always somebody who's trying to be negative in order to succeed, and that I don't know where it's going to happen, but someone will emerge.
I can name a couple of scientists in particular, but I think it's best to focus on positive stuff.
I agree.
Professor David Smith, what's your closing remarks for today?
My closing remarks are pretty straightforward. Generative AI is a very important part of AI, and it is a subset of AI. It's very important for companies who have not looked at it to look at it, begin to use it. It's extremely powerful. Don't be the last one to go there. You can dip your toe in and experiment so easy that it's unreal. Most of the browsers and search tools and everything are using some form of generative AI today. When you call in to most customer supports, most help desks, you're using generative AI today, whether you know it or not. So get in there and begin to use it. It doesn't bite. Second, be very aware of its biases and what it can and cannot do. Moses made the comment earlier that when you use it for writing, it's there. I say get great outlines, but you have to be a human to go and finish it. When I had it write the poem for me, it did 75%. The last 25% was me making it make sense. So you have to understand that it doesn't solve all the issues, but it is a very, very important part of doing them. Third thing, you have to track the data governance rules today. You have to track the privacy rules with it, and the legal model rules. We're beginning to see legislation put in place where you will be held responsible for the decisions that generative AI makes. So you need to understand all those environments to be comprehensive day. And Sharif, like we talk about almost every time we're on panels with you, uh, education's key to this. Education of students, education of parents, education of regulatory, of government officials, and regulatory and education and business, from the business executives to the people who are developing these. Education is a continuous, lifelong process right now. And actually, generative AI is a great tool to help you with your continuing education, but you do need to become educated on it as in so many of these. So Sharif, thank you for letting me be part of today again.
Thank you.
So one
Yes.
point, because I deal with law and multinational law a lot with Boston Consulting Group, one rule of thumb I'd like to just put out there is just do everything as if GDPR applies everywhere in the world, and that's a good start. And the other point I'd like to make is generative AI can help everyone, but the more expert you are in a particular field, the more powerful generative AI can be for you. You know, you're not going to turn someone that doesn't have a clue into an Uber expert using generative AI as much as you're going to turn an Uber expert into a super genius using OpenAI or similar language models. But
Yeah, you should consider AI as a mind amplifier, like creativity amplifier or a cognitive amplifier. That's actually a really good
yeah,
example.
that's a great point.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for your excellent project. Definitely, we have a very good seminar next month. So we are actually heavily promote our content to the student communities. They may learn from today's dialogue. Also, they may join as a in our training program, and we can do research program and develop some startup for solving local problem of Asia Pacific region. We are working with Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, some points, also Malaysia, Singapore, definitely in Australia, China, and Indonesia. So if you have any good idea, any good solutions, we will always want to welcome.
I think an immediate solution is to take Llama 2 and build a localized version of it in Bengali.
Yeah, definitely. We want to focus on these things, and definitely all of you can join in our research centers as a faculty, and you can train more students, and you can publish more research papers, and you can solve many complex problem of the industry. And Thank you, everyone. And this is one kind of revolution we are doing right now. Many government agency and corporation and academia supporting our World Talent Economy Forum, and this is because uh, of all of you, because all of you regularly join in World Talent Economy Forum, share your knowledge and expertise. Now it's become very valuable for all of the knowledge hub. So your contributions will be very helpful, and by this way you can engage with millions of people. Millions of people. This is untouched. The big company never can engage with these communities. We have the ability to communicate with them. So any good idea, we are happy to support you. And any good things, we are happy to contribute. So thank you, everyone. This is brilliant session.
Namaste and salam alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.